Hope you're well. Thought I'd do a quick podcast today about what I call the nutritional tracking grey zone. And it's based on something that I see a little bit amongst clients within the Mind and Matter Method community when they are trying hard to manage their diet and control their diet and monitor what they're eating, but they're getting stuck in the grey zone between not doing it and doing it enough for it to be effective. So maybe you've heard this concept before, but when it comes to your work, especially in a post-COVID world where a lot of us are working from home, especially in a world where we have instantaneous access to connectivity tools and networking tools on all of our devices, including our smartphone, which goes everywhere with us, it's super easy to get stuck in the zone between working and not working, where you're not at work, but you're still checking emails in the evening, or you're sitting watching TV and you're thinking about what you've got to do tomorrow, and then maybe you're checking in with a couple of your colleagues about a project that you've got running, or you're answering client questions or whatever it might be. That is the worst place to be when it comes to your work, because you're not working formally, so you can't give the things you are thinking about your true focus, so you can't actually act on them and solve the problems that you're thinking about. But you're also not resting and recovering and giving your brain and body the chance to heal and come back fresh and energized and focused for your next workday. And also, more importantly, you're missing out on all of life outside of work, because if you are not physically working, but your brain is still in work mode, you're not giving other things your true attention, whether it be just relaxing, watching TV, eating dinner, talking to your partner, talking to your kids, playing with your kids, or whatever it might be. This is really common for people who work from home. I found when I worked in the NHS, I would finish work at, say, 5 o'clock, but then I'll just do one more check at 6 to see if anyone sent me a Teams message, or I'll just check my emails one last time. I remember one time I was out in Leeds, I think it was, for a night out on a Saturday night, and stayed over, then got the train back to Durham on the Sunday morning. A little bit hungover, but I was fine. And for some stupid reason, decided to check my work emails. And I had an email there from somebody who I was line managing at the time, who was a bit of a difficult personality. And she had sent me a very long email, which was quite accusatory about the ways in which I had let her down and the impact it was having on her mental health and all of this other stuff. And it absolutely ruined my Sunday. It was so stressful because I knew I was having to go back to that the next day. And that, unfortunately, is a behavior that I have then carried into my work now, which it's even easier for me now because I don't have segmentation between my work and the rest of my life, in that I work at home. As you can see, I'm in my living room if you're watching. When I finish work, I don't travel anywhere. Now, I can create space by going for a little walk after work, which I sometimes do, or often I will just potter around the house and do some menial tasks like tidy up, do some household chores and things like that to give me that separation, that mental separation and the physical separation. But because of the nature of my work now, where a lot of it is responding to clients, a lot of it is inbox management, a lot of the kind of front end stuff is sales conversations and answering questions from prospective clients, it's very easy for me to get stuck in that grey zone in the evening and at weekends, especially at weekends. In fact, if you've ever done Training with Confidence, my free course, it used to be that the sales window for the course ran from the day I shared information about the Mind and Matter Method 6-week program and the offer and the discount, which was usually a Wednesday or a Thursday, up until Sunday. And that meant I was still in work mode on Saturday and Sunday. And not only was I in work mode, but I was in the most stressful kind of work mode, where I'm like trying to make sales and I'm worrying about if it's going to work. And is this person who I think would be a great client going to sign up, or are they going to reject me and say no? So I've intentionally now closed the discount on a Friday so that I can take the weekend completely off. In fact, this is the last day of the current run and the current discount window, and that has made a massive difference to my mental health because I know that the weekend I don't have to think about sales, which is amazing. It took me 2 years to think of that. So that's one way I'm reducing the amount of time I spend in the grey zone, but I still fall victim to it. I will still check WhatsApp business at the weekend. I will have questions from clients. They know not to expect a response from me at weekends, and I'm sure they are completely okay with that. But I will still just find myself just reading one message and then, I'll just send a quick response. And I have to tell myself, no, this can wait until next week because you're not working. So I'm still working on this now when it comes to my work. I've got way better. I use Freedom app blocker on my smartphone, which means I can't actually access WhatsApp business or Instagram after 5 p.m. in the week and all of Saturday and Sunday, apart from 12 till 1 p.m. and 4 till 5 p.m. I can set the same blocks up on my Mac using the Cold Turkey app and really treating myself like a child and micromanaging my own focus and energy is the only way that I have found to realistically solve this problem. So the grey zone is an awful place to be when it comes to your work because you're not focused and working, you're not resting, recovering, and enjoying life. And I see a similar parallel with some people when it comes to the tracking protocol that they are using to manage their diet. So, as a reminder, the anti-diet method is so effective because it is the optimal balance between flexibility, enjoyment, and control when it comes to your diet. So, all of those diets with names, fad diets, crash diets, restrictive diets, they are fantastic at the control element. Whether it's tracking every single thing you eat and weighing it all out, or something like keto or Atkins or paleo, which has you restricting whole food groups, they are all great at control, and that's why they work. But where they fall down is they have no flexibility and no enjoyment because you can't track your diet if somebody else is cooking. You can't ask them to weigh everything out. Well, you could, but you would be unreasonable, and it becomes very difficult to manage when you're going out for meals or you need some more flexibility at weekends. The same is true for keto. Unless you're going to go to keto restaurants, you're going to find it very difficult to eat out. You're going to find it very difficult to go to your parents' house for Sunday dinner. And because they lack that flexibility, they then also become unenjoyable. It becomes miserable to be tracking every single thing you're eating. I did that myself for years and it impacted my relationships, it impacted on my social life, and it impacted on my mental health. Similarly, so many of my clients and people that I speak to have struggled with something like keto because they've done it for a little bit and got good results, but then found they couldn't stick to it and it became miserable because they felt like they were the problem and it became a failure. Now, the reason the anti-diet method works as a sustainable solution is because it combines the right amount of control with the right amount of flexibility and enjoyment, which means everybody sticks to it, which means they get fantastic results. So as part of that, we do need some control. We need a way of monitoring and managing what you are eating because without the data, we are flying blind. We can't see, and therefore we can't diagnose any potential problems, whether it be you're not eating enough protein or maybe the caloric deficit is not assertive enough for you to be seeing the fat loss, the weight loss you want to see, or indeed flipping that round, you're not eating enough to give you the best chance of building muscle if you're in a muscle building phase. But there is a grey zone here. So I'm going to show you 5 stages on the spectrum of not tracking to meticulously tracking everything. And I'm going to show you why getting stuck in the grey zone in the middle is the worst of all worlds. So before I get to that, I just want to say that we're not including mindful eating as part of this, or basically just eating to hunger, because that is a fantastic tool for having a healthy relationship with food, understanding the qualities of hunger and being more in tune with your physical hunger cues. And if your goal is simply to maintain your current physique and live a healthy existence. In those circumstances, mindful eating and not tracking is a fantastic tool. Long term, that's where I want everybody to get to. I want everybody to be confident that they can just eat to hunger, prioritize the right things without having to weigh anything, without having to track anything. And if you find you're putting on a little bit of body fat, maybe you reduce your portion sizes. If you find you're losing fat when you don't want to, you increase your portion sizes, or you look at how you can maybe eat a little bit more. But for the purposes of this discussion, mindful eating doesn't work because everyone that I work with has a desire to change their physique. Usually it's fat loss, but once someone's achieved their fat loss goal, then the attention turns to, I actually want to build a bit of muscle. I actually want to look stronger. I want to look more athletic. And in those circumstances, we have to be assertive with the diet. We can't just fly blind. And if you want to give yourself the best chance of success when it comes to fat loss and muscle gain, we need a level of control. So mindful eating, great as a long-term sustainable solution, having achieved your ideal physique. But in the meantime, we need a level of visibility and control. So we use tracking, using MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, or NutriCheck, or any of those other tools as the strategy for achieving that. Now, the other thing that I'm going to say is that everything comes at a cost. You can get faster results. You can make faster progress towards your physique goals, always. But that is going to require more sacrifice. It's going to require more diligent habits, such as tracking protein, making sure you're hitting your protein goals, tracking everything you're eating, managing your calories, saying no to alcohol, having less meals out, or you can get sustainable results at a slower pace, but it's a bit easier. You can enjoy meals out. You can have a couple of beers at the weekend. We still track, but we don't have to give it the same level of diligence. So sometimes clients will say to me, yeah, I'm making progress, but I'd like it to be a bit faster. And I always explain this to them that we can go faster, but in order to do that, you're going to have to decide what the trade-off is. Is it tracking diligently at weekends? Is it saying no to your Saturday brunch with your family? Is it building up more of a caloric deficit in the week so you can have that brunch on a Saturday morning? There is always a trade-off and there's always a sacrifice that needs to be made. So in general, we set things up so that it can be sustainable, so that you can lose body fat at a satisfactory rate that feels sustainable and enjoyable. But there's a time and a place for going faster, being more aggressive. So at the ends of the spectrum, stage one end of the spectrum, you've got not tracking your diet. So you're trying to lose fat, but you're not tracking what you're eating. Maybe because you're fatigued by the process, maybe because you've just fallen out of the habit, maybe because there's a barrier such as not knowing what to do when you eat out, or you buy a sandwich for lunch and you don't know how to track it. By the way, we've got tools, resources within the anti-diet method that show you how to navigate through circumstances exactly such as those. So that should not be an impediment to success or to tracking. And when a client says to me, I'm plateaued with my weight loss, my first question is always, well, I can't see your nutrition data. So are you tracking what you're eating? Because if you're flying blind, Occam's razor, the most obvious answer is the most likely. The most likely answer is you're not in a caloric deficit and we can't see it because you're not tracking what you're eating. So that's one end of the spectrum. And by the way, not tracking and having a period where you are just chilling out about things is totally fine. I did that last summer and the first part of this year because I had other priorities. Last summer, it was simply that I was just like enjoying life and I'd got really lean. So I was okay with like gaining a kilogram of body fat over the summer, which maybe I did. I can't remember, but I was totally chill about it. And because I just wanted one less thing to think about. First part of this year, my focus was on recovering from a series of chronic injuries, and the tracking just became one thing too many. And I didn't want that extra decision fatigue, so I just didn't do it. And yeah, I gained a bit of body fat, but I was okay with that. So the trade-off there for me was, don't have to think about tracking my diet, can eat what I want, still going to make informed, smart choices. And if I gain a couple of kilograms of body fat, I'm okay with that because that's not my priority right now. And by the way, the last month, I've dropped that body fat off again. I'm down to 68 kilograms from 72 or so. So it's okay, but if you've got a desire to really transform your physique, then that's not a good place to be. The other end of the spectrum, which I also don't necessarily recommend, is tracking and weighing every single thing. So you would include your supplements, collagen, which includes protein, or omega-3s, which include fats, I see some of my clients tracking all their other supplements, vitamin D3, caffeine pills, all this other stuff. You don't need to do that. If you want to, you can. But also tracking vegetables, also tracking ketchup or semi-skim milk in your cup of tea or coffee, or basically everything. And that will give you the quickest possible results because you will see exactly how many calories you're eating. And yeah, there'll still be a degree of variance, but it will give you the most accurate reading you can get. But obviously, it requires the most sacrifice. But either of those extremes are better than the middle ground. And the middle ground is where you're trying to track daily, but it's patchy. You track your breakfast and lunch, and then you forget to track your evening meal and anything you eat after your evening meal. Or you track all of your meals in the day, but then you know that you're snacking on other things, or you're having a little bit of this here and there, but you're not tracking that. Or the most common one, you're tracking Monday to Thursday, and you're tracking everything, and then Friday to Sunday, there's no data. That is the worst place to be because that's the worst of both extremes. You're not doing enough for it to be accurate, but you're doing too much for the process to be peaceful and easy. So in that circumstance, we still have no visibility over if you're in a caloric deficit or not, because the data will say you're eating 1,800 calories per day, for example. But if you're missing a meal, we don't know how many calories that extra meal has. It could be 700, it could be 1,000, it could be 300. So I would encourage you not to get stuck in that grey zone. Now, I don't recommend the extremes. I don't recommend the middle, but there are two options that are kind of between each of the other ends of the spectrum that work better consistently. The option between patchy tracking and tracking everything is the anti-diet method. We track with a degree of consistency, but we use estimation. We include flexibility into the calculation so that we don't need to track everything, so that we can forget vegetables, milk in your tea, supplements, ketchup, mayonnaise. No, scrap that, not mayonnaise. Ketchup, barbecue sauce, whatever. And you can eyeball portion sizes when it comes to chicken, beef, whatever. I encourage you to track some things more closely, like oils, fats, carb sources. But that makes the process of tracking easier. And like I said, there are tools and little how-to videos that show you how to track that delicious beef sandwich you bought from the local deli during your lunch break at work, or how to track the beef stew that your mum cooked on a Sunday. So that should not be an impediment to success. And that means you're tracking with enough accuracy that we've got visibility and we can have a high degree of confidence in your results, but without having to stress over every minor detail. But even then, that can be just too much for someone. For a few different reasons. Maybe it's just seasonality. You're going through a period where you're traveling a lot. Maybe you don't have a lot of control over your meals and your lunches or your evening meals are catered. Maybe you've just gone through a period of doing that consistently and you want to chill out a little bit. Summertime is a typical time that people do that. So in those scenarios, the other option I would recommend is pick 3 to 4 days a week where you are committed to tracking and use them as example days. Now, what I mean is, on those days, your commitment is to track consistently using the anti-diet method. So it doesn't have to be weighing everything out. It doesn't have to be tracking every single thing that you're putting in your mouth, but it should be following the guidelines of the anti-diet method. So carbs, fats, protein. We ignore vegetables. We ignore a little bit of whatever, ketchup, milk, all those other things. We use some estimation, but we are complete in tracking the 80%. And just pick 3-4 days a week where you're going to do that. And you use them as example days because most of us have a very consistent approach to our eating. Most of us will eat the same meals on rotation over a 2 to 3 week period. Most of us have the same meal times consistently. So if you treat those as like a snapshot of your nutrition, and we can make a safe assumption that the other days are similar, then we can still make informed choices. We've still got enough visibility to diagnose issues, but also be confident that you're in a caloric deficit or you're in a caloric surplus and you should see the results you want to. Now, if you are going to do this, you must make 2 of the days the weekend days, Saturday and Sunday. Don't just do Monday to Thursday and then forget Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because that won't work. Because most of us have consistent eating habits. Most of us drink a little bit of alcohol on the weekend or eat more at weekends than we do in the week. Like, obviously, people eat out more at weekends. There's more social stuff at weekends than there is in the week. Therefore, if you're going to do this, Saturday and Sunday have to be 2 of the days. But if you do that, it can give you an idea of a typical weekly diet without it being something you have to necessarily think about every day. And going back to that gray zone idea, you're at the extremes. You're either tracking or you're not tracking. You're not getting stuck in that zone of still feeling the fatigue of having to think about it, but not doing it with enough accuracy that it's worthwhile. Liam, one of my clients who is a teacher in Malaysia, does this. So his lunches are catered at the school he works at. It's really difficult for him to track that with a degree of accuracy, and also the availability of the foods he has is going to be different to maybe a typical Western diet. So he does that and it works. He's got really good results. He's found it sustainable. He's stayed consistent with it. So that can work. And I would recommend that is a better option than the gray zone in the middle. So choose stage 2, tracking some days and using them as example days, or choose stage 4, the anti-diet method. Try not to get stuck in the middle of doing it, but knowing that you're not doing it with enough accuracy, because that is a fast track to mediocre results with the fatigue of still having to think about it and still worrying about it. I would rather you weren't worrying about it at all and accepting that your results were going to come a bit slower than worrying about it every day and feeling like you're failing because you're not tracking it and getting frustrated about it. So that's it for today. Hope this has been helpful. As always, let me know if anything I said needs clarification. I'm using the summer diaries to just share ideas and riff on things a little bit. So sometimes I might say things that maybe aren't as clear as I would like. That's how we develop ideas. That's how we come up with better solutions. So your feedback is really valuable. It's really appreciated as well. Building up a little bit of a backlog of podcasts to release because I'm away for a week coming up and obviously not going to be working then. Definitely not going to get stuck in the grey zone. So until next time, to your success, and we'll speak soon.